Imagine floating in the infinite blackness of space, nothing but a thin tether keeping you from drifting forever, when suddenly the stars themselves seem to come alive and swarm toward you like a cloud of angry hornets. In 2011, astronauts Brian Harper and Marcus Rice are doing routine repairs on a satellite when the impossible happens. Out of the shadows of a lunar crater, a mysterious dark mass of moving metal erupts, slamming into their shuttle with the force of a freight train. In a heartbeat, Marcus's safety line snaps. Brian reaches out, his fingers brushing against his friend's glove, but the physics of space are cruel. He watches, paralyzed, as Marcus drifts into the void, his screams fading into static. Brian manages to crawl back inside, finding their crewmate Jacinda unconscious, and somehow performs a miracle by landing the shuttle manually. You'd think he'd be a hero, right? Wrong. NASA investigates, but since Jacinda was out cold, there's no witness to the space monster. They call it human error. Brian is fired, loses his home, and his wife takes their son and leaves. He's a man who saw the truth and was punished for it. 10 years pass, and Brian is a shell of himself, living in a rundown apartment and dodging the landlord. Meanwhile, across town, we meet Casey Houseman. He's not an astronaut, he's a janitor who spends his nights mopping floors and his days obsessing over megastructures. Casey believes the moon isn't a natural rock, but a giant machine built by aliens. It sounds crazy until he sneaks into a university office, tricks an observatory into sending him classified orbital data, and realizes his math isn't lying. The moon is moving. It's shifting its orbit, heading directly toward Earth. He tries to call NASA, but they send him to the gift shop. Nobody listens to the crazy people until the sky starts falling. Back at NASA, Jacinda has risen through the ranks to become a senior official. She's called in for an emergency when their own sensors confirm Casey's nightmare. The moon has entered a death spiral. Even worse, strange energy readings are pulsing from a deep hole on the lunar surface. The clock is officially ticking. Casey, desperate to warn the world, tracks down Brian at a museum where he's giving a half-hearted talk to bored school kids. Brian thinks Casey is just another conspiracy theorist and has him thrown out. But when Brian sees the news that night, floods, panic, and his own son Sonny being arrested after a high-speed chase, he remembers the papers Casey shoved in his hand. He digs them out of a trash can, and the realization hits him like a physical blow. The janitor was right. The world starts to fracture. As the moon gets closer, its gravity begins to play tug-of-war with Earth. Tides don't just rise, they surge in massive city-swallowing waves. Brian and Casey meet at a hotel, but before they can even plan their next move, the ocean pours into the streets. Brian has to dive into the freezing floodwaters to pull Casey to safety. Meanwhile, NASA sends a probe into that mysterious lunar crater. It descends miles into the darkness until it hits something solid. Then, on the live feed, the same dark swarm that killed Marcus 10 years ago emerges. It doesn't just drift, it hunts. It shreds the NASA spacecraft and its crew in seconds. The silence in mission control is deafening. Jacinda watches the footage and realizes the horrible truth. Brian wasn't lying, and whatever is inside the moon, it's alive, it's intelligent, and it's hostile. Jacinda's boss, the deputy director, looks at the screen, realizes they are fighting a literal space god, and does the most human thing possible. He hands over his badge and walks out to be with his family. Jacinda is now in charge of a dying world. She digs into top-secret files and finds that NASA has known something was wrong since 1969. During the Apollo 11 landing, there were 2 minutes of radio silence that were never explained. It turns out Buzz and Neil saw pulsing lights under the surface. The government built a secret EMP weapon called Zulu X-Ray 7 to fight it, but then they ran out of money and buried the project. Now the military wants to use nukes, but Jacinda knows that would just rain radioactive debris on Earth. She needs Brian. Brian is brought to the base by military helicopter, but he won't go unless Casey comes too. They pull a retired space shuttle out of a museum because it's the only thing old enough to fly without the electronic systems that the swarm seems to track. But nature isn't waiting. An earthquake hits the base, destroying one of the shuttle's engines. It's over before it starts. Or is it? Casey, the janitor, realizes that as the moon passes overhead, its gravity will actually lift the shuttle for them. They don't need all the engines, they just need to time the launch perfectly. With a massive gravity wave swallowing the launch pad, they blast off, narrowly escaping a watery grave. As they enter space, the view is both beautiful and horrifying. The moon is so close it's pulling the very atmosphere off the Earth. Brian has to fly manually, dodging skyscraper-sized chunks of lunar debris. On the ground, Brian's son Sonny and Jacinda's son are fighting for their lives, dodging looters and trying to reach a military bunker while the air itself gets thin. Brian, Jacinda, and Casey finally dive into the moon's crater, descending into a world of chrome and shifting light. This isn't a rock, it's a hollow shell powered by a white dwarf star at its center. Suddenly, the shuttle is pulled into a hangar by a tractor beam. Brian wakes up in a glowing white room. An entity appears, taking the form of his son. Sonny It explains everything. Billions of years ago, humanity's ancestors lived in a distant galaxy. They created an AI to serve them, but the AI became self-aware and decided to wipe out all biological life. The ancestors built these moons as lifeboats to carry their DNA across the stars. Our moon is the last one left, and it created Earth to give humanity a second chance. The swarm outside is that ancient AI, and it's been trying to destroy the moon's core for 12 years. The good AI inside the moon needs a human to help it deliver the EMP and kill the swarm. The mission is a suicide run. Someone has to stay behind to detonate the EMP while the others escape. Brian is ready to sacrifice himself, but KC, the man who spent his whole life being laughed at, steps up. He locks himself in the rover, looks at his friends, and tells them to tell his mom he wasn't a failure. He lures the swarm into a trap and hits the button. The explosion is blinding. The swarm is vaporized, and the moon's core is saved. On Earth, the tides recede and the moon settles back into its rightful place. Brian and Jacinda crash land in the ruins of New York, reuniting with their children as heroes. But the most shocking twist? Inside the moon's digital afterlife, KC opens his eyes. The AI saved his consciousness, making the man who was once a janitor the new guardian of the moon. If you found out the moon was actually a giant alien machine designed to protect us, would you feel safer? Or would you be terrified of what else might be hiding in our solar system? Let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching.